Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second episode of Warrior Chats. I'm Baron Avi. I'm a Paragon Warrior out of Fiorenai in Winter's Edge.
And I am Baronet Haraldr. I am a Paragon Warrior currently playing out of the Ever-Living Woods in Winter's Edge. And today we're going to be talking about examples of warriors from the rules of play and a few other notable examples. So I'll get started with us today, unless we want to do any other foreword before we begin.
Yeah, I
Avi?
would kind of like to mention that we're recording this just a couple of days after the passing of a dear friend, both of us personally and of the game as a whole, and just kind of like everybody to think about Josh Bunch for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I think we're probably ready to go.
Alrighty. So I don't have my notes in front of me, but I'll be doing my best. So if we go look on the rules of play, page 39 of the PDF, the warrior page, under our examples, starting at the beginning, we have William Wallace, who, as I'm sure we all know from Braveheart, might be better class as a wizard for being able to shoot fireballs out of his butt. However, the real life William Wallace was much more of a tactician. He's generally depicted as wearing heavy mail, which was common of the period in late 12th, early 1300s, as well as a heater shield and a sword. And more of a tactician was his notable accomplishments, being able to help guide the beginning, or laying the groundwork of the Scottish independence movement for Robert the Bruce and them took it up and saw it to completion. And then next, or I don't know if we want to do me just go through all of them, or we talk about one and then do a little commentary about it.
William Wallace, look at the historical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at William Wallace from Braveheart, Braveheart is the worst piece of crap history film ever made. It's entertaining, but it's awful history.
Yeah.
The armor in it, oh god, I've gone on rants about this many times, but there's an image of Robert the Bruce in it wearing sweater mail, which is just a sweater that's been painted to look like chainmail.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie won the Oscar for best costuming.
I mean, as long as it looks good, but I've seen it and it doesn't really look that good. Anyway, next we have Lancelot, who comes from Arthurian legend. It's actually a French invention of the part of the Arthurian canon. He's regarded as being a very virtuous knight, which in the canon he actually falls away from that virtue, causes a big rift between him and Arthur in the circle. However, most of his martial accomplishments are noted as being tournament fighting, jousting, fighting in tournaments, one-on-one combat, as well as his general depiction being plate armor, swords, jousts, or lances, around not jousts, but in that sort of thing. And it varies a lot from depiction to depiction from what I was able to pick up on. Any comments, Avi?
Not really in terms of examples, but there's kind of a neat little historical tidbit here. Lancelot comes from the castle Joyous, or Joyous-Gard, excuse me, in Arthurian legend, and Charlemagne holds a similar place in French canon to Arthur in the English legends. And the name of Charlemagne's sword is Joyous, so possibly some sort of neat link there. Just kind of odd historical tidbit.
Yeah, don't you love real life Easter eggs?
Yeah.
All right, so our next one is Achilles, who to me is one of the first good examples of an actual warrior. More about how warriors we can use our true grit ability, because Achilles was regarded as being unable to be defeated because his mother dipped him in the river Styx, except for his ankle, which he held him by, which, if you know what an Achilles tendon is, where he got his weakness from. And his depictions, he's basically a Greek hoplite, heavy helmet, plate armor, spear, shield, and a Xiphos with the sword.
And looking at the legends for Achilles, he actually wore what was incredibly distinctive armor. We're not told exactly what made his different, but there was something about it that made him identifiable. This was his armor. Because in the Iliad, I believe it's Patroclus steals his armor, wears it, and the Trojans then focus on Patroclus, thinking that they're actually going to get a chance to kill Achilles.
Maybe it was something like how Alexander had that special feathered helmet.
Entirely possible. Like I said, I don't recall the Iliad expressly stating what makes it distinctive, but there was something about it.
All right. And our next example is Spartacus, who was a gladiator trained in, if I remember correctly, it was the Murmillo style, which replaced the previous Gallic style because Gaul had been integrated into the Empire, Roman Empire at this point. So he was trained with, dang, I really regret forgetting my notes. I want to say heavy armor, we would call a tower shield, possibly a spear or some other weapon or trident. And what he's most notably known for is leading one of the Roman slave revolts, which he is noted in the histories for being able to drill the slaves into a very formidable force. They were able to hold out against multiple attempts by the professional Roman army to dislodge them from their stronghold. And this notes Spartacus less as a ability-wise warrior, more of a tactician.
He's a leader, not necessarily a fighter when it comes to that sort of thing.
Right.
And that's actually kind of a common thread with the examples of warriors listed in the rules of play.
Absolutely. A lot of them are leaders or tacticians instead of fighters. Well, yeah, that's what you just said. My bad. Our next one is one that really surprised me. It's Mad Mardigan, a purely fictional character from the movie Willow, which was, I believe, from the 1980s. And Mad Mardigan is a accomplished sword fighter, very, very skillful sword fighter, but his character portrays him more as a rogue slash bard. He's kind of flighty, very much more talk his way out of a situation than stand up and fight. So my take is I feel Mardigan here is misplaced, being an example of a warrior.
Confession time. This was the first time I'd ever watched Willow, just actually for this project. And yeah, in the second act where we first meet Mad Mardigan, I'm absolutely going to agree with you. Late second act, early third, I can see it. The scene where he's defending that fortress, he's actually a really good example of a warrior, although he's
Yeah.
using those siege engines under 20 feet.
Willow is a really good movie. The CGI and the special effect, well, not CGI, not really CGI. It's too early for CGI, but the special effects are pretty good. It is a good watch. I would recommend it.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And so our next example is, to me, one of the best examples. Miyamoto Musashi, who wrote the Book of the Five Rings, was it?
Yeah, Book of the Five Rings. Now, forgive me, it's been 20 years since I read it.
Yeah, I'm not much of a reader. Probably should try and find an audiobook. But he is noted as winning as a swordsman. So this is usually fighting to the death in I believe 1500s Japan, winning 60 or 61 duels. He also wrote another book. I don't recall what it's named. And he invented a form of two-sword fighting that he used. If you've ever heard the story of a swordsman rowing out to an island late for his duel, and then carving from his oar a bokken, or a little wooden sword to use in the duel, that is Miyamoto Musashi. He's a very excellent swords fighter, and started his own school or even during all this fighting, and then wrote his Book of the Five Rings close to the time of his death to impart his knowledge into to his successor, which of course I guess they published at some point.
Yep, and to give a little bit of context, Musashi is living during the Warring States era, or the Sengoku Jidai, the age of the country at war. And this is when armor tech in Japan goes from being neat but kind of secondary culturally to serious changes over the course of about 150 years. And there's some absolutely beautiful stuff coming out of the country at that point in time. Their armor culture goes from being, okay, this is neat, to this is a primary aspect of our fighting. This is something we develop heavily because we're doing a lot more warfare. There's a really, really neat website about it called sengokudaimyo.com that you should check out. So I think the next one we're looking at is the Roman Praetorians.
Our next example are the Roman Praetorians. And so this one was a bit hard to pin down for anything because as an institution, it lasted for several hundred years up until they got so corrupt that the emperor disbanded them and destroyed their barracks. The Roman Praetorians I don't remember if they started as an elite guard or just a specific legion that the emperor decided was going to be his personal guard. And over time, they started to become the emperor's personal little personal security detail and like personal little army. And so what this means is they went through most of the iterations of the Roman professional army's equipment, which was chainmail, the plate, and then the plate mail or the lorica segmentata, tower shields, scutums, tower shield scutums, pilums, swords, all that stuff. Which I feel is the Roman Praetorians are an excellent example of the diversity of equipment that warriors are able to use in our game.
Absolutely agreed there. Now, the Praetorians do have some neat elements in history. Like, if you've seen Gladiator, the Emperor Commodus, that is the opponent, is the antagonist in the film, he didn't die in the arena. He did enter the arena a few times, but he was killed by the Praetorian Guard. Now, later on, the Praetorians stopped being so much a fighting organization as being the bureaucracy of the city of Rome, and the corruption there is what caused them to get dissolved by the emperors in, I want to say the 400s, but I'm not sure on the date there.
Yeah, 300s or 400s is what I recall. As well as I remember reading something about them also working as spies in some instances.
Yeah, they ended up taking a lot of different roles. I'm going to agree with you that these are probably the best example of warrior listed in here.
Goes on to the last example, which is Julius Caesar. And if you've ever studied history in the West, you probably already know who Julius Caesar is, know some of his exploits. And quite frankly, not a great example of a warrior. Another really just like a big leader tactician that just made a really big impact in where he was at the time.
Yeah, I've read Caesar's commentaries a few times for research purposes, and I think there are two examples, maybe three, of him actually taking the field as a fighter rather than standing back and doing his job as a general, directing his troops. That's kind of a common thread in a lot of these examples. I think they could have done a better job picking people.
So that concludes the examples. Of course, I didn't touch on the ones from the little intro paragraph, but I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about them some other time. So Avi told me that he did some extra research on some other potential warrior example candidates. So do you want to go ahead and tell us about those?
Yeah, I think some great places for folks to start if you're looking for examples is human history. There are some really good ones from early China. From if you're at all familiar with the Dynasty Warriors games, those are actually based on a novel called The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. And in it, all of these exploits that you see in the games, well, the games exaggerate them. But according to the novel, these are historical deeds that supposedly occurred. Now, they're magnified, but Zhang Fei stands on a bridge in his armor with a glaive and holds off something along the lines of 10,000 enemy warriors
Oh
just by
yeah,
intimidating them.
just intimidating them.
Yep.
That is definitely some warriors right there. That's something I've done. Not 10,000, but I've held off at least five, at least five people stop just by standing there in my armor.
Held that bridge long enough for his friends to retreat, and then destroy or had the bridge destroyed. And a lot of the characters in the Dynasty Warriors games, if you go just that little level deeper, actually are great examples of warriors.
Hmm.
The Zhao Yun from those games. At one point, he carried the infant son of Liu Bei, who was one of the claimants to the imperial throne, inside of his armor and rushed through enemy lines to get him to safety.
Oh
If you
yeah.
want to, if you want to go a slightly less exaggerated route, the Housecarls from the late Viking era, the guys who opposed William the Conqueror's invasion of England. They are the heavy armored guys of the day. They're trained in pretty much every bit of kit that is reasonably available, and they are the professional standing soldiers. Now they're little more than a guard, but in those days, a guard could be several thousand men.
Were they also sworn to carry their master's burdens?
Yeah, the Merovingian Guard. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sorry if I'm not, but the guards of the Eastern Roman Empire were drawn largely from Norse and other Norman peoples who moved down and enlisted with the Byzantines.
I always thought that was pronounced Varangian.
Varangian, thank you.
Actually, My character is based off of Varangian Guard, something very cool to me when I was developing my persona years ago.
I was unaware of that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. But yeah, basically the Byzantine emperors rented out Vikings. And I'm told that they were pretty loyal to those emperors just for the nature of having sworn their oath to them and not as much to the coin that came through,
Yep.
which depictions of late period Varangian guards show them in lamellar, splint mail, and wearing kettle helmets. And I remember seeing in a previous edition of the rulebook the early period diagram of them with a long axe hauberk was the one for, I think it was a picture for Paladin where they had like a bubble shield around them in the picture or something like that, which is an aside to what we're talking about here.
Yeah, in previous editions
But
of the rulebook, the artwork was all over the place.
yeah,
V8 did something really good by unifying the art styles. But if you look, there are also some good examples of the Hundred Years' War. Give you some really good examples. The free companies in southern France, where you've got the kind of endemic warfare of the late 14th century in France. Good examples. From the English side, the Hundred Years' War, we think of the longbowmen, and those guys are absolutely the killing power of the English armies. But remember, what they're doing is they're standing beside or behind the heavy infantry who are fighting dismounted, who are tanking those blows on their armor.
right,
It's an early form of combined arms warfare. That kind of hits the examples I wanted to go over. Do
right.
you have anything else you want?
Remember,
Hmm?
well, talking about that type of combined arms warfare, I remember my world history class in college learning about the hoplite phalanxes, the Greeks, and how the hoplites were just the tanks at the front of the line, or I guess the first 16 ranks of the line, maybe. And then behind them were archers, javelin throwers. I think the order was javelin throwers, archers, and then slings, which I know everyone talks about slings in Amtgard,
Maybe
but
in
I guess
V9.
that would be maybe V9. But having that front line, heavy armor front line, is absolutely essential to the rest of the formation to be able to fight effectively. So in Amcard, so that your wizards, your bards, your archers aren't having to worry about stuff coming straight at them, because we're there in between them to make sure they have space to cast, space to line up shots, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think if we were to do a college degree in Warriors, one of the early classes would be standing in front of other people 101.
Oh yeah,
Great example of that teamwork, though, from my own experience. We were doing a river battle, probably about a 6 foot wide river, and just long enough that the guys with three pole arms on the other side were able to set up a really nasty killing field across it.
right,
My buddy Nevin is running Wizard. He pings a force bolt off of the center or off the center pole arm, the one that they'd stuck imbue weapon on, destroys that pole and opens up a gap maybe 6 inches wide in their overlapping fire. I leap across that river right into that gap, lose a lot of armor in the process, but I open up that hole and my teammates are able to just stream across. And by the time the other team has brought me down, there's nothing left of their line.
right.
One of the big things about Warrior in any example is that teamwork.
Absolutely agree. Like I can't tell you a number of times where I went into a fight without actual backup and I just got crushed, no matter how much armor I was wearing. Without backup, the enemy team's just going to chew you up and spit you back out at your respawn.
Yep. If you don't have somebody watching your back or somebody helping dish out damage, you're going to suffer. We are not one of those lone wolf classes. I think that's about all I've got for today. What about you, Haraldr?
Yeah, that's pretty much all I've got. I think that rounds it out pretty well.
Well, in that case, I think we'll go ahead and close this off. I'll have this posted sometime in the next couple of weeks, depending on my work schedule. And I invite all of you guys to listen in to our next episode, which I believe will be covering the scavenge ability.
That's first one. I've had 6 level warriors so long I never remember what the order they're in. Yeah, first one scavenge.
All right, we'll be covering scavenge here in a couple of weeks. Stay tuned. Catch y'all on the next one.
Stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. We'll be back here. Same warrior place, same warrior time.
Clank, clank, clank.
Clink, clink, clink.